Hello and welcome to the first Microlive of 1987.
In tonight's programme, we'll be taking a look at Miami's new citywide communication system.
We'll be visiting a training course designed for people who are terrified of computers.
And we discover how even the simplest micro can get access to whole libraries of information. Oxford may be the city of dreaming spires, but even at England's oldest university, there's no escape. Once they were used only in science departments. Today, every field of study needs its computers, and more people are having to use them. It's easy to forget just how recent the micro-revolution is. Only a decade or so ago, most computers lived behind locked doors and were used only by highly trained specialist staff. Nowadays, it seems they're everywhere. Some people have taken to computers rather like the proverbial ducks to water, but there are still many who react with sheer and absolute terror. Like most universities, Oxford does teach people to use computers. The Computer Training Centre offers courses at every level, but the Tuesday afternoon class is unique.
Welcome to Computing for the Terrified. This is a special class for people who've never touched a computer before and are feeling a bit nervous about their first experience with technology. Before we discuss your question...
The group of people who come here for the afternoon is very mixed. Some are undergraduates, others are dons, but the course is open to everyone who works at the university. What they do have in common is a very real fear of the unknown.
Now, everyone knows that if you hit the wrong key on a computer, something terrible will happen. So the first principle I want you to remember is this. The computer will not explode. I'd like each of you to find a computer in the room, and you have 5 minutes to make the computer explode by pressing the wrong keys.
At first, there's no attempt to do anything with the computer. It's enough just to get used to touching it. Are you terrified?
Absolutely, yes.
Why have you come?
Because I realise that even children in schools are using them, and I have no knowledge at all, and I feel I've just been left out, and I'm going to be illiterate about computers. My little girl is going to know about them, and I'm not.
So what are you hoping to get out of this afternoon?
To understand what all the words mean, and to actually have a sort of understanding about how to use a computer, a very basic understanding. I've never even played with one.
Well, one of the conditions on which my employers said they'd take me on is that I'll have some idea how to feel confident with a keyboard and to know how to work a computer on a basic level.
Have you ever used one before?
Well, I've used the Sdx Spectrum for playing games on, but that's about as far as it goes.
So would you describe yourself as terrified?
I'm terrified of my ignorance more than of a computer.
I'd like to congratulate you on how close you came to exploding those computers. And I want to tell you the 3 stages of computing that you're going to go through in this class. And it's the 3 stages that everyone goes through who does any computing. Stage 1 is abject terror. This is when you've never touched a computer before and you don't know what to expect. Now, stage 2 is when you actually start using a computer. You try to do something on it and you don't get exactly what you expect. Stage 2 is total confusion and frustration. Stage 3 is when something has gone right. You've tried to do something on a computer and it's worked.
Kit Cowlishaw has come to Oxford from IBM to teach information technology. She had the idea for this course when she discovered that many people were unable to take even the first step towards computing.
Well, when I came here, my mission was to interest art students in computers. And I started by sending out a survey to find out what their current attitudes were and whether they were interested in taking computing classes. And I found that there was an enormous amount of interest. So when I interviewed the students and asked them why they hadn't taken the introductory course that exists already, they all said, oh, I couldn't do that. There would be other people in the class who'd already used computers, and I'd be terrified. And again, the word terrified seemed to pop up. as the reason that held them back from going to the standard course. So I developed the idea for sort of a pre-introductory course for the terrified.
Each exercise allows the students to try a different aspect of computing, as painlessly as possible and without the fear of failure. For example, by using an easily understandable guide to local restaurants, they discover that interrogating a database is not nearly as intimidating as it sounds. Oh, we're about halfway through now. How are you feeling?
A lot better than at the beginning, certainly.
What do you think you've picked up?
Well, I think I know where everything is on the keyboard now, and it all makes sense what's in the book. I'm learning to operate the keyboard to get something that comes up on the screen. So it's very pleasing.
Now, you were terrified at the beginning. How are you feeling now?
I'm enjoying it. I really am. I'm actually beginning to master a little bit here and there. But the program keeps escaping me every so often, but the textbook's good.
Fairly simple introduction, is it?
Yes, very good, very
painless?
straightforward. Yes, it is difficult, but on the other hand, I actually feel I could master the thing now.
Well, that's the nice thing about it, actually, that in one short afternoon, they get a glimpse of all these different things they can do with the computer. Normally, they would have had to sign up for 4-week or 8-week courses. Not everybody's willing to make that time commitment for something so unfamiliar. But in this time, what we can do, we can't train them, we can't make them experts. We can show them a taste of each type of computing, a little bit of databases, a little bit of word processing, a little bit of spreadsheets. Some try programming, but they only do it for 20 minutes, little bites, little tastes. And then they know what they're aiming for. They know what's useful to them. They know what's interesting enough to them to justify signing up for that 8-week course that they weren't sure about before. That's the point.
Do they all go away happy?
Yes.
Every one of them?
Yes, everyone.
I think it's unbelievable that within 3 short hours, you can go from one emotion to another, an emotion of near terror, apprehension, to one of fascination and excitement.
You know you can go now. It's 5 o'clock, end of class.
I want to finish my letter to my husband that they said I can do on the machine.
Okay, I'll leave you to it.
Thank
Cheers.
you very much.
Many
Bye-bye.
thanks.
Well, one reason why courses like that are so important, especially in the academic world, is that micros are rapidly becoming the key to getting every type of information. For Kit Cowlishaw's students at Oxford, learning to use a computer is just as important as learning to use the library. Now, on its own, this micro has a usable memory roughly equivalent to the contents of one large paperback book. But if I connect it to a modem via a telephone line, I can get through to a mainframe computer with as much information on it as an entire library. Now, this directory, which is for Britain alone, lists over 300 separate sources of dial-up information. And they range from the complete texts of newspapers and magazines from all over the world to detailed information about medicines and entire collections of law reports, company statistics and commercial data of every kind. Well, this computer is connected to the official Airways guide on an American database in Illinois with details of every scheduled air service in the world. Now, supposing I, here in Britain, need to organise a trip from, say, Alice Springs to Sydney in Australia. That could be quite tricky. I mean, I don't even know which airline it is. But with this, I can simply enter /s to alert the system that I want to schedule. And then it asks, what was my departure city? Well, I chose Alice Springs. So I'll give it that information. And it's going to prompt me, yes, destination is Sydney. And it'll keep asking me questions until it gets all the information. And we've got a problem there because there are several Sydneys in the world. It gives me the various choices. I want number 1, which is Sydney, New South Wales. And what's it going to ask me for next? Departure date, 22nd of July, let's say. And I suppose, yes, the time. So I'll go for 10 o'clock. And then it'll digest that information and hopefully give me the information that I want. Yeah, there we are, choice of 2 flights, the 10 past 12 or the 10 to 2. Now, that sort of information is very valuable, especially to me. And the database companies are happy to charge you for it. But most of them charge you not by how much information you find, but by how long you're connected. Now, for instance, this one costs about 50 pence a minute. It doesn't sound a lot, but it all adds up. So, it's not just a matter of knowing how to get the information, but how to get it quickly. and it can be very quick. Now, all the travel details that the computer needs have been pre-programmed onto a function key. Now, equally, you can type the details in yourself as long as it's in the correct sequence. Either way, there's my choice of flights, same as before, but achieved in a fraction of the time.
Well, the airline guide is a very specialised database, but there are many others with more general information in them. This one is World Reporter, a British database, and amongst other things it stores the full text of 4 or 5 newspapers, magazines like New Scientist, and even BBC News bulletins. Obviously very useful to people like journalists, and it's easy to use. The commands are in straightforward English. Now, to search a database like this, you enter keywords that you think are likely to appear in the articles you're looking for. So, suppose I wanted to find out whether the Austrians have done anything interesting with musical robots. Well, I type in get and keyword Austria. There we go. And almost straight away, yes, it echoes those words back to show that it's understood. It searches through its memory, and in no time at all, it tells me that there are over 1,200 articles with that word Austria in them. Well, right, that's a bit too many for me. I couldn't read that lot. So, out of it, I will ask it to pick the ones that also refer to another keyword, music. Right, now it'll look through all the articles it's already selected to pick out only those with music in them. And there are 39 items there. And of course, I could narrow the search down further to articles with, say, robot or computer in them. All very straightforward, but there is a quicker and therefore a cheaper way of getting what I want. I ask it to get the following: Austria and music. And the other keyword was either computer or robot, so if I bracket those together, computer, comma, robot, it will do the whole lot in one search. Off it goes. Now notice that this particular system uses signs and plus signs and commas for those ands and ors, but other systems use the words themselves. And now it'll hunt through all the articles that contain those combination of words. And of course, I could have selected those before I went online. Well, what have we got? We've got 6 items retrieved, and I can look at those by asking for context. That will highlight the keywords themselves. Up it comes, something from the Financial Times, 31st December. Ferrets that bleep and browse with minds of their own. Well, I don't know how that got into Financial Times, but yep, there's one of the keywords, robot. I don't see Austria or music anywhere, but try the next page. Bound to be there somewhere. Music, yes, music box. No musical robots. Oh, wait a minute. Musical invention of the year was a computerized piano. So, yes, it does have something on robotic music in Austria. Fair enough. Well, I could now save all 6 articles onto disk, or I could print them out and read them later. Now, as we said, that probably costs a couple of pounds, but just think how time-consuming and expensive it would have been to plough through a library of journals and papers and then photocopy all the extracts you want. In fact, some public libraries are beginning to offer this kind of facility, and it'll become even more useful once it's made easier to use.
Of course, the biggest database customers are in business, but they are increasingly being used in the academic world, and that's not just at university level. 18 months ago, the Department of Trade and Industry announced its scheme to pay for modems in schools. The scheme was designed mainly for secondary schools, but now even primary schools are learning to go online. Alan, what do your children use the modem for?
Well, we're a part of a pilot project for TTNS, which is a network, Times network for schools. They use the modem to attach their own school computers from the classroom to the telephone wires to the network.
And who do they communicate with?
There's a range of primary schools all over the country, and in fact there are primary schools all over the world that they can communicate with, but we haven't actually made any contact with anybody, but I know other schools have.
What sort of messages do they send back and forth?
Well, the sort of messages that we've been most successful is when we're doing a project on a particular area. We've asked for information. I can remember the day that we asked for information about playground games. We were collecting information about playground games. And we had, when we switched the modem on and we looked in the mailbox, there was 25 replies from all over the country. And it took us until 8 o'clock in the evening to actually download them and to look at them all. And it was an amazing amount of resources that we got. But the excitement the children actually got from seeing all that communication coming to them personally from other schools, it was just magic. It was so instantaneous, so immediate, which is something you don't get when you get letters through the post.
So apart from familiarising themselves with this equipment, I gather you think the children have something else to learn as well.
I do. I think that it's important that they use computers in their everyday lives. I think it's also important they realise how computers are used in the real world outside. I think it's not enough for us to be insulated in the classroom and say, there's computers, there's all the other facilities that we use. I want them to realise that they can use computers as the business world uses computers. They can use them for communication, they can pick pictures off satellites, they can pick information from other schools from all parts of the world. These tools are here now for them to use, and I think they should be exposed to them to learn about them.
But given the shortage of cash in schools, even if they have been given modems by the government, there will be many schools who simply won't be able to afford to use them. Well, meanwhile, our children are growing up into a world where information will be gathered and exchanged electronically, both for business and for leisure. So surely some way could be found to subsidise this particular part of their education.
In 2 weeks' time, we'll be looking at the whole question of micros in primary schools. Where they're being used well, as they are in that school, micros can be very powerful classroom tools, but most teachers simply haven't been offered the training they know they need.
In the 1950s, the US government were persuaded by a large manufacturer of kitchen equipment to allow cooking by radio waves. Now, unlike today's microwave cookery, never caught on, so the allocated frequencies at 800 megahertz were eventually assigned to radio communications. But even with the release of extra frequencies for radios, there is so much demand for private communication systems in the US that the federal authorities have ruled that systems must use the airwaves economically, and that means computers. The city of Miami is one of the main winter resorts for rich Americans. But it has a seedier side. It's also one of the main gateways into the United States from the Caribbean and South America, with particular problems of drug smuggling and violence. A nightmare for the police.
There was a time in the city wherein communications needs were tremendously undermet. We had a problem of dead spots in our high-rise downtown area. We had problems with officers literally waiting for a clear line to gain access to our communication system. We had intermodulation, channel crossovers, CBers, even taxi cabs interfering with our communication system at times. We think that what we've done most recently has come a long ways towards solving most of those problems.
Miami became what's called a beta test site for a new communications system from Motorola called SmartNet. In other words, the city and the manufacturers are working together on the project. The city now has the sort of communications it so desperately needed, and Motorola has feedback from a real situation which enables them to improve their product in advance of its commercial launch.
The current system is a citywide system. In addition to police and fire communications, provide communication services for our Public Works Department, for our General Services Administration Department, our parks officers, lifeguards are part of this system. Literally every aspect of city government is part of this communication system.
Till recently, each department had its own communication system. Their radios communicated on their own frequencies or channels to their headquarters. Some channels, say for the lifeguards, would usually be quiet, whilst others, like the police, would be saturated. Now, 20 frequencies are shared by everybody. One frequency is for data only and keeps track of who's calling who. Each time a transmit button is pressed, the identity of the radio, the call's destination, and the frequency it's been allocated are all sent in advance of the spoken message. This way, the system can recognize an emergency message and give it priority if necessary. Obviously, the special requirements for each department would differ, but they all use the same clever radio. John Major of Motorola.
This is the Sdx Portable that's used in the Miami system. You can see it has a keypad and a display, antenna, on-off knob, volume, and a selector switch for controlling which fleet or subfleet the radio is talking on. Now, I'll take it apart. This is a 5-layer printed circuit board that contains surface-mounted components. It has an 8-bit microprocessor, 32K of ROM, that's 32,000 bytes of information, effectively 80 pages of typed information. Next to that, we have a 2K RAM, 2,000 bytes of dynamically changeable memory, and a 2K E-squared, and that's 2,000 bytes of information that can be electronically changed, but which is always permanently stored.
This E-square is perhaps the most important component of the radio. It's a halfway house between hardware and software, and as such is a form of firmware. It's programmed to give the radio its own individual identity and capabilities. But the important thing is that it can be reprogrammed over the air, if necessary, and this is what makes Miami's communication system so versatile. The programming is done from any one of the headquarters, using a network of IBM personal computers. In fact, the police are the main users of the more sophisticated facilities available with this system. The radios are individually assigned to the officers who must sign for them as they pick them up at roll call.
Attention to roll call.
Mata. Mendez. Wright. 243, 723. Vila. Shalacy. 244, 638. Brito. Coladas. 251.
Police headquarters then knows which radio is with which officer in which area, and each radio is accounted for. This is vital, since these radios are the keys to the police frequencies, which are, of course, changing with each conversation as the management software reallocates them.
And Lopez are there getting the rest of the fenders on and stuff. But they should be there another hour or so anyway.
Yes, Al, I have a...
With the trunking system, it's nearly impossible for anyone to sit and monitor our radio channels. We have a 20-channel trunk radio system. A person would have to have 20 different scanners side by side in order to listen to us. So if a radio fell into the hands of someone, it shouldn't be, that individual could merely change positions on the radio and listen to the various talk paths that we have established for radio communications. They could also key up the radio itself and become part of the conversation and also cause a disruption.
So radios that are lost or stolen are turned off by headquarters. They're then dead, valueless hardware without the life of the software.
One of the things that we've incorporated on the back of our radio is a little finder's, a little note on the back of the radio that says finder's fee, and it has an address. Yes, ma'am. And in fact, we had one particular incident where a radio was stolen. The subject attempted to use the radio. We turned the radio off, and he discarded the radio. The radio was found, and because the label was on the back of the radio, we were able to get the radio back.
But sometimes even more security is needed, and officers in the field can ask to be reassigned to a secure channel. This can be done immediately by a radioed code.
We often have the need for small groups of police officers to talk very privately. Quite often when they're involved in drug stings or other very, very private internal investigative type matters, there is a need to allow these groups to segregate themselves from other elements within the entire system. It's a feature that we found very, very attractive.
You pat these guys down for guns and shit. Okay, and here's a kilo of cocaine that they brought to us. What I did was I got into the car and I had a little test bottle, okay? It's cocaine. So
but in a dangerous situation, the police may have no time to call for help.
One of my units was on routine patrol driving down the street, and he was flagged down by a citizen. A man had cut a woman with a knife, and he ran up to it. It just happened very quickly, and he couldn't get on the radio. And the guy was coming at him with a knife, and he pushed a button, and the dispatcher, when it shows an emergency, she stops all transmissions and finds out what unit has the emergency.
Yes, correct. We'll call back checking it by 17:30.
But all these extra facilities mean more work for the officers in the radio dispatch room, who initially had to cope with difficult screen displays and slow response times.
What is really hard about this is we're bringing a tremendous amount of computing power to people that have to use it real time in stress situations. So what we've been doing is bringing together users, showing them what we have, and getting their suggestions. They say, I'm going to do this function, and I'm going to follow this function up with some other function. We maybe didn't see quite how they'd follow it up, and we maybe didn't see in advance how fast they'd want access from one function to the other.
When we went online with it, when we went hot with it, we had a presentation for all of South Florida to see, and the timing problem and the access time problem with the radio system really wasn't good enough to go online with it. It was taking up to 3 to 5 seconds to access the system. In a private industry, that isn't too bad, but in public safety, that's absolutely unacceptable.
Motorola had to put this right very swiftly.
It's a lot better. It's not what I would like it to be, but I don't think they're going to do any better. It's just a little above what our old system was at 400 milliseconds access time. We're at about 600, and it's probably as good as they're going to do with all the software, the outbound, inbound messages that the radio has to do to access a channel.
The system obviously is slightly slower than some people would like for it to be. We have found that it is not too slow because it is still well within the specifications as we require. However, a training effort has been going on and has been reasonably successful that has caused people to begin to talk after the button is pushed as compared to talking from the hip as some people have been accustomed to doing.
So, for Miami's much improved public safety communications system, a delay of a mere 1/5 of a second is a small price to pay. Well, this particular radio won't be on sale in the UK as the 800 megahertz bandwidth is otherwise occupied. In fact, if you're watching us in the Manchester area, we're coming to you on 800 megahertz. But the radio communications market in the UK has been given a boost with the reallocation of the old 405-line TV frequencies to private radio networks of the push-talk kind like this. Now, this will differ from cellular in that it only allows talking to people on your own system, rather than being able to telephone anyone anywhere. But there will be a 999 facility. So, if those people who use their cellular phones just to keep in touch with base or transfer onto the new system, this could relieve some of the congestion on the cellular channel.
Well, that's just about it for tonight. In next week's programme, we'll be visiting Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the world's most high-tech campus. But until then, good night.
That edition